yesterday, maybe 2 days ago when I was doing the research for this, and you were speaking about if you could rescore a film, you said you would rescore The Wizard of Oz, and you spoke a little bit about the dark side of Oz, which I hadn't seen until the other night, and I ended up watching. And that's one spooky film. I ended up down a little bit of a rabbit hole with it.
It's one of those. It's unbelievable. I mean, some guy was obviously sat there in the 70s, after Dark Side had come out, just listening to the turntable on the headphones with Wizard of Oz in the background. And it's just the way it fits is uncanny. I suppose to explain the idea a little bit to anyone who's not sort of seen it or doesn't know what it is, it's basically Pink Floyd's album Dark Side of the Moon dubbed over The Wizard of Oz from start to finish. But the most impressive part is the beginning of the film to the first colorization of the whole thing. It's just wild. And Pink Floyd were actually asked about it a lot, I think, if they had written Dark Side to directly coincide with Wizard of Oz. And they deny it to this day, but I think they're talking bullshit, man.
It kind of makes you wonder if, when you think about like the rhythms to the editing of film and stuff, if there's some kind of natural rhythm to things that it just so happens that these two things line up, and because they've kind of both tapped into the same groove.
I think that's probably the most sensible answer I've heard in a long time, actually. But that's definitely a thing, yeah. I mean, God, what were we watching the other day? I think it was The Simpsons, right? I had The Simpsons on in the back. I love The Simpsons. I think it's great. I can't remember what song we were listening to. I think it might have been the Beastie Boys or something. Not Beastie Boys, sorry, the Beach Boys. Two very different bands. Heroes and Villains. I think that just taps into a rhythm that goes in with anything. Clearly, but yeah, always nice to do that, especially when you're writing. If you put the telly on in the background and put it with no volume and do some writing, you get some pretty interesting stuff going on.
I was going to ask that actually. Do you have any like go-to films or pieces of kind of TV or whatever that you tend to stick on when you're writing?
Simpsons.
Like, if you're going to do that, if you think of yeah,
yeah. I like anything really. It's not something that I've been doing for a long time. Just throwing something on in the background. There's actually a really nice piece on Netflix, which is a fireplace. And you can have like a burning fireplace in your home whilst you're reading a book. That's very good, especially in lockdown when all you want is sort of coziness and you want to avoid the sort of four walls setting. But yeah, Simpsons is fucking great.
That kind of run that they had from maybe like second or third season all the way through to like 10th or 11th. Just like a solid 10 years of TV that's just every episode just knocking it out.
It's crazy. It's really crazy. Yeah, and they just get better and better as they go along, and then they just crash off. But I think they will go down as some of the best TV of the 20th century / 21st century.
The thing about The Simpsons as well, and it's the same. It was actually, I hadn't seen The Wizard of Oz since I was a kid.
Sure.
Until I watched it the other night. The thing about both of them is that there's so many shots in that are so artistically done, and every shot almost feels like a painting. I mean, particularly with The Wizard of Oz, Simpsons as well, but when you think of The Wizard of Oz, like the set design and the kind of composition of it and everything, it's just every shot.
It is.
It's Lynchian as well.
It is. It's very. I imagine Lynch has taken a lot from it. Or Lynch, David Lynch would have seen the potential that those sort of worlds could have. But the Hollywood guys at the time were just not exploiting it because no one fucking wanted to see weird stuff. I think Lynch made it very clear that there is a market and an audience for far out shit. Which, I mean, yeah, you talk about The Wizard of Oz, it's just a classic. It's just, I mean, you get some horror stories about some of the crazy stuff that happened to, forget the name of the leading actress.
Judy Garland.
Judy Garland, yeah. So it's, that there's some horror stories surrounding that and the sort of golden age of Hollywood, but what actually entailed around that's pretty frightening. The movies they were churning out at the time, you got Gone with the Wind stuff and Casablanca, obviously, which everyone talks about. Yeah, superb. I love films. Films are fucking great. Just allow you to escape into this other reality for an hour and a half, 2 hours. Video games do the same for a lot of people as well, which is why I think, especially in lockdown, people turn to video games and films, and then comes music if you can listen to the right music, of course. What have you been listening to in lockdown? I mean, or in the perceived lockdown that you were having?
Recently, actually, the last lockdown, the Dylan record,
Yes,
because that came out. That came out just as it was kind of
that's
ending. It was
right.
quite a nice way to finish it.
I broke lockdown rules to listen to that. So Rough and Rowdy Ways, right?
Yeah,
BBC Six Music were doing this all day sort of build up to the Dylan record being released, basically playing a load of records that Dylan had been influenced by, and then a couple of Dylan's numbers. And it was just a really great program all the way up to it. And my friend, he has this really great speaker system, a really great speaker system. He said, what are you doing this evening? And I was like, I'm staying up and listening to the Dylan record. What are you doing? And I think his girlfriend got involved because we were just texting back and forth, and she was like, why are you just sat here texting each other about how good this Dylan record's going to be? Why don't you just meet up and listen to it together? And this was the first moment in lockdown where he sort of felt like, yeah, why aren't we meeting up? Before you take everything to gospel and you just stay in your home and, sit about doing fucking nothing. But so I went over and we had a couple of bottles of wine and a jazz cigarette and listened to the new Dylan record. Yeah, it's fabulous. It is just, I must have listened to it maybe a dozen times. It's just incredible.
it's one of those records as well that you want to listen to it from start to finish. You don't really. I wouldn't say I really put on a song from it. I tend to kind of go the whole way.
Yeah.
The whole way through.
No, I think that's fair enough. Just shows you the caliber of what he's doing, and the guy is 77. Is he, or is he little? Is he? Is 78? I think. Fucking hell. I think the most interesting thing that we talked about in terms of my friend when we listened to it is the way he's completely embraced himself as a collage artist, and you pick up different pieces and references from all of the different literary works that he's obviously studied over his life.
That track that I Contain Multitudes, he kind of touches on it quite a lot.
I think that's purposely written to do so. But yeah, he's done it all his life. That is the kind of artist that Dylan is. He's a collage artist, and I think anyone would be fucking daft to not try at least once. It's a when you start pulling pieces together and making them your own. And they are your own. This bullshit about Dylan's a plagiarizer is just complete rubbish. Only Dylan would be able to take phrases that out of context would seem so nonchalant and meaningless and give them meaning, inject them with some sort of sentiment. He's a really important guy. I'm glad you're listening to that record because it's fucking great.
Why? It's interesting what you're saying though there about people, accusing him of plagiarism. Something like sampling is kind of culturally accepted, but then when it comes to something like what Dylan does, it seems to be a little bit frowned upon by some people.
Yeah, that is interesting, isn't it? I think with sampling, you're purposely creating something that's familiar. You're stamping something that is familiar that people already know. So with sampling, you hear that groove in a song and you fucking follow it, and then whatever comes, you dig it. Whereas with Dylan's, it's a little more dangerous. It's a little more of a tightrope walk, which is the stuff that he references from Shakespeare and from Walt Whitman and from Arthur Rimbaud, or definitely Arthur Rimbaud's style. People sometimes don't like that. As I said before, it takes, people can sit down and listen to music and think, they just see it as such a face value, see it as such a thing that exists, that it's just one thing. It's really not. It's so many different things that have had the most perfect circumstances to then come together and create what it is you're listening to. And that's where you get some of the best records of all time, is because everything was in the right place to allow those songs to exist. Dylan's just a vehicle. His body is just a vehicle for art and literature. And that's why he got the fucking Nobel Peace Prize for literature, because he fucking deserved it.
What age were you at when you kind of stopped taking music just as it was at face value and kind of started looking a little bit deeper into it and thinking about it quite a lot?
Yeah.
I
was about 16, 15. You get to a point in your life where at that age, you're also not taking rules and authority at face value. Everything before that, you just do what you said. It's what mommy says and it's what daddy says. And Dylan is what happens when you don't listen to what fucking mommy and daddy say. It's an experiment, isn't it? And when you start you all have your first smoke a pot and suddenly explodes your tiny mind. You either have it or you don't. Some people just, and whenever I'm making music, I always make sure to send it to the people that I know that look at it at face value, that will just see it for what it is, because it's important. You might be thinking that you're doing the most amazing and experimental stuff and thinking, yeah, this is, really pushing the boat out. But if you show it to someone who then says, well, it's a bit, and you're not doing the right thing. So it's that fine balance. Yeah, I don't know. What about you? When did you start taking an interest into music? I mean,
I think I kind of got into films before I got into music.
interesting. But films, you can say the exact same sort of. It's the exact same sort of thing, breaking down each shot and.
Yeah, you're spot on. I mean, I got into films in terms of starting to get obsessed with them when I was maybe like 14, 13. And then by the time I got to about 15, 16, it was you were, reading interviews with the directors and becoming obsessed with what every shot meant. Like that, what's that Shining documentary? Is it Room 237 when it goes through everyone's kind of different theories for what it could mean?
I have no idea. I've never heard of that, but that sounds fascinating.
There's I think it looks at a dozen kind of theories behind the meaning of The Shining, and it's fascinating to kind of see everyone's different in interpretations of it.
Yeah, it's great. I'll definitely look that up. But yeah, it's film is the exact same setup, isn't it? It's breaking everything down, and I mean, Kubrick is just a genius, and I think there's that old thing that Kubrick never ever wastes frames. He'll always cram everything into the shots.
Fincher as well. Don't know if you like David Fincher's films. He feels like a slightly modern equivalent of that, where every shot is so meticulously done and kind of done to a T. Each little detail.
I'm not familiar with him. What stuff does he do?
He did like Seven and Fight Club.
Oh, sure.
Gone Girl. He's got a new one coming out, which is about the screenwriter of Citizen Kane.
Cool, very cool.
And the kind of backstory between that, and it's kind of done in that sort of. It's done like in the style of a film of that time. And I know that Nine Inch Nails have done the soundtrack for it and done it with instruments that were only around at that time and kind of done an orchestral thing. So it's meant to be incredible. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's coming out on Netflix, like it's end of this month or something.
I mean, there's the interesting thing about when musicians sort of blend into films, and you get sometimes you get the most amazing stuff. You seen I watched Lawless the other day, which Nick Cave wrote the screenplay for and did the music with Warren Ellis, Tom Hardy, Shia LaBeouf. Can't remember who directs it, but that's great. That's a really decent film, and yeah, it does all the period instruments and stuff, which is really cool. So
it was kind of one of the first films, I think, as well, where Shia LaBeouf kind of took on the role of a slightly more serious actor.
Yeah, it was. It's hard not to admire him in that film. I think he's great. Fuck what everyone says about Shia LaBeouf. LaBeouf is the man. You get all these people saying he's an asswipe. He's the fucking man, Shia LaBeouf. I'll shine his shoes any day of the week.
I watched a couple of his recent ones. Have you seen Honey Boy, the one that he wrote about him and his dad and that relationship?
No. What's that called?
Honey Boy. It's a film he wrote about his kind of experience growing up as a child actor and his relationship to his dad. He was a bit of a prick.
Of course, because he did.
And then he plays his dad.
Interesting. So because he'll understand that character more than fucking anyone. But he did even Stevens when he was a kid, didn't he?
Yeah, back in the day. It's interesting you mention Kubrick as well, or we mentioned him a few minutes back, because the album cover for this has kind of got a slightly Kubrickian edge to it. It's almost like Kubrick mixed with Dylan, like they're two clashing.
It was definitely influenced by Dylan's All Back Home. That was, I remember seeing that artwork. It was just like, well, it tells 1,000 stories, We saw the space that we were recording in Eve Studios, where we did the second record, and we just fell in love with it. We took so much from those walls, so had to immortalize our surroundings, and it just felt so right, I remember getting the photograph when we went down, and we actually shot it in the room that we stayed in. It looks like it's this big living room, but that was just full of beds. So we took the beds out. We got the sofa from the control room, which was a bitch to, work around. It's just this old like vicarage cottage, We got a lot of shots, and the cat that was with us in the studio for the 3 weeks, sauntered into the room as we were, just sitting down and taking the first few shots and tested the lighting. And the cat jumped on the sofa where we were sat and just sat between us. As he did when we was in the studio, we'd be recording and he'd come down and fucking sit on his lap because, he was great. Adam the Cat, he was called.
The cat's almost like a ghost in that album cover because, I've got that record on vinyl and I must have looked at that cover a heap of times and I didn't spy the cat. I didn't see that cat until a couple of days ago when I was putting it on to do research for this and I was like, there's a cat in that cover.
Everyone says that. Everyone, they always say, I didn't even realise the cat until, 2-3 weeks after getting the record. But yeah, when we saw that shot, it was like, that's the one. So we got that sort of Kubrickian. It's the long, with the ceiling and the floor in shot, and you could just see that opening out. Everything centered around one piece. Very cool. Enjoyed doing that shot a lot.
How long did you spend deliberating on the references you were going to kind of pack into it? Because there's so many books and stuff kind of scattered about the place.
Yeah, put together a mood board of what we wanted to sort of foreshadow or have in the album cover. But yeah, it was more just on the day. We just brought boxes of stuff that we thought would be pretty cool to have in the cover. And we set them up and lots of them worked and some of them didn't. But yeah, you've got the old record, you've got a load of literature that we were reading at the time. You got the red roses for our political allegiance, if you like. Definitely not for our geography, though. Yorkshire's the white rose. So, and then, yeah, I think my favourite one is there's a star in one of the mirrors. If you look in one of the mirrors, there's a star, a red star, very faint. That was above my bed, and I always used to go to bed looking at that red star, and then it comes up in black glass. Sunshine in my TV star, gonna go far, black glass. I had a fascination around mirrors at the time when we was doing everything. Every time we was, because I do all the videos with Sam, conceptual wise, and I had this strange fascination with mirrors. I just love the idea of what they do and would like to do some more with that.
There's something quite cinematic about them.
Yeah, they're just very spooky, very mysterious.
Thinking of the record as well, with Something Wicked This Way Comes, the scene in the book, where the kind of hall of mirrors that play such a pivotal part.
Yeah, yeah, I was just obsessed with mirrors and it seeped into everything. Never really spoke about it before, actually, but yeah, it's just doing a lot of acid at the time.
Well, I was going to ask about the clocks as well, because there's 3 clocks on the cover.
Yeah, clocks and mirrors, man. Clocks and mirrors, I was just, something, I didn't quite know why they were so important. I just knew they were. Yeah, clocks. I think every clock in the album cover is our birth time. Although I think one of the birth times is wrong, which is mine, because I rang my mum up. It's like, when was I born? What specific time was I born? She was like, I'm sure it was something like, 4:30. Anyway, she rings me up the next day. It was 6:00. Are you fucking joking? So one of them's wrong on the album cover.
What's the kind of layout of that cottage like? So I need to drag the couch up to get it in that room, because it is the control room. I was reading an interview. Is the control room like below the live rooms, or how?
Yeah, the control room's in the basement. We stayed in the vicarage upstairs, which is the rooms that were for the old, church inhabitants. And then you have the middle floor where we had a kitchen, which we would make an effort to do dinner in there every day, or tea, if you're from where I'm from. Then you'd have all the live rooms on that floor. So you would have a keys room, piano room, live room where you would set the drums up and guitars, and then downstairs you would have this crazy control room that goes along to a echo chamber where you do all the pieces of percussion and stuff, and then a vocal booth. So it was just like an anthill. I don't know what it was about that space, but it just felt so. Just everything was flowing. There was a train that was just fucking flying, and we were all off in different rooms doing our own thing whilst different takes were going on, and we had a very, very cool time.
How long were you in for?
3 weeks. About 3 weeks. So wanted to do a little bit more, but that's the nature of making a record, is that the time constraint is there, especially when you're you're on an independent label. time constraint is there for you to push yourself creatively, because you're not going to be able to do everything you want to do. You have to allocate your time correctly. Otherwise, you lose a lot of money and don't really get much out of it. So that's sort of, I was having a conversation a couple of days ago actually with one of my friends who works with us, and she's talking about how important producers are and what they're really there for. And one of the things you can find yourself doing very quickly in a band is just going down these rabbit holes that just have nothing at the end of them. You know, it's such a waste of time. So a producer's there to crack your heads together and say, this is a waste of time. And that completely underplays the producer's role, because there's so much more than that. But we've been talking about doing a record on our own now for, you know, the last 6 months, thinking, you know, we just can do it and we'll do it ourselves. But it just comes to the conclusion that we just wouldn't be able to do it, you know. And it goes back to this face value thing on music, is that everyone thinks that you just shit it out like that, you know, that's it, you've got a song. And it's so much more than that, especially recorded music. A live show is something different, you know. A live show demands feel and belief, you know. It has to be believable. It has to be something where you're like, this guy is, I would have to fucking eat out of the palm of his hand. With recorded music, it just has to be so, everything is intricate, everything is thought about, and everything is worked on. When people think, yeah, that music's face value, all those individual sounds and those things that make records iconic, you can't just do them like that. You know, you can't just transfer what's going on in your head onto the equipment, because you don't know the equipment. Whereas producers, they just have this understanding that is unfathomable. We're hoping to go in and work with James Skelly over the next few weeks.
The guy from the Coral.
Yeah, did the Blossoms record and stuff. I think that's going to be really exciting, see what we could do with him. But I think he is the sort of epitome of that. You know, you look at Skelly's and the records that he's worked on and the artists that he's worked with, and he just has this glitter, this stamp that you just can't get anywhere else apart from a well-drilled producer. So
it's interesting what you were saying about the idea of when you're in there, you go down a lot of rabbit holes that don't come to really any conclusion. The producer's job is to pull you out of that. When you did the first record, was it easier to kind of avoid them because everything was so tied to that concept and it was so kind of surrounded by that kind of Orwellian dystopian soundscape and notion? I
think the first record, we were far too inexperienced to go in to record an album. So from my experience, we didn't do those rabbit holes enough. The first record for me was just so tough because it was so much pressure and so little time. And we'd gone into the studio with 7 songs. So, and then we sat down. We intended to do an EP. We got it rolling, and it was sounding fucking great. You know, even we were sort of taken aback by how good it was sounding. And the management turned around to us and said, we want an album. So we tried to pull our finger out and just write in the studio, basically.
That must completely change your headspace, though, does it?
Yeah.
When the management says that, because if you think you're going in to do an EP and suddenly you're in working on your debut record.
Yeah. It was intense. It was the pressure was unbelievable. I remember just falling into this sort of depression that I've never experienced since, thank fuck. But it was, I always remember the date. It was October the 31st. It was Halloween, 3 years ago from Halloween. And that was when my head just fell apart. And it took me about 6 months to get it back together again. It was horrible. But when I look back on the album and I look at the things that we were doing, especially with Gavin, I'm just blown away. You know, it feels like it wasn't us. And that was probably due to the exhaustion, probably due to, you know, the amount of drink and drugs that we were fucking taking. I don't know, but
how old were you when you went in to record that record?
18 when we recorded that record. So it was sort of the first introduction into, you know, the seedy parts of music and what comes with it, and sort of the sacrifices that you have to make, you know, mentally and emotionally to do it. You know, you look at bands who go on the road, they go on the road for, you know, probably 3/4 of their year, and they get maybe 1 or 2 days back in their own bed, and they go out again. I don't think many people would be able to do it. You know, if they really understood what went on in bands and stuff, and in the music industry, that a lot of people would fucking drop out and say no. Having said that, the one thing that's been on my mind for, you know, the last 6 months is going back in with Gavin from the first album and doing another record with him. I'd love to. I'd really love to give him another go, because listening back, it's just fucking great. It's just, I really had a bad relationship with that record, but yeah, you listen back, it's like fucking hell.
It's like a sledgehammer, that album. It's just one continuous swing, and
it's wild. I'd like to see what Gavin can do with us with an abundance of rabbit holes, as opposed to not enough. So,
what were the 6 tracks you had when you went into work on that record?
You could tell from a mile off. ICB, L'État, Brutus, Gotta Get Through. We had Brave New World. That's the 6 tracks.
Those are the kind of things that hold that album together. You can tell that the rest of the album kind of just breathed out from that.
Yeah, definitely. They were the anchor to whatever we were doing. Everything else, I completely agree, is just some sort of offshoot and orbiting around it, if you like.
But then, speaking of Orbit itself is quite different.
Yeah, that was something that was at our hardest point in the studio. I remember we just had a phone call that one of our friends from back home, from back in Doncaster, had decided to take his own life. So that was pretty heavy. Charlie, the bassist, was working on these lyrics for Orbit. To me, that song just recalls home in no other way that we've been able to do before or since. It just sort of summed up our perception of the world around us as 18-year-olds coming from a, you know, dead end fucking town. We did this like really fast version, you know, this like beat poetry sort of. Listening back, and it was fucking great. It was electric, but it just wasn't there. It wasn't doing it for us. So we were all in this really somber mood, and Gavin was like, "Why don't we just jump in the live room and we'll play some music together?" I was like, "Okay." And then that's when Gavin started playing the notes on the piano, and then we just started playing around it, all one live take, just straight through like that. And then the words just flew. It just came out. Just read them off a paper. I think it was 1 or 2 takes, that song. So very proud of that song, actually.
You completely get that sense of rawness in it.
It's raw, both emotionally and the way it was done. And I think Gavin Monaghan is very good at identifying that. You know, I remember when we were mixing the record, because we mixed it in the studio that we recorded it in, which is not very common. Normally you go out of house to mix, but there's a guy called Joe Murray there who is he's just a genius. And Gavin, you know, Joe would try and clean everything up and take all the little bits out. And Gavin was like, "No, fucking keep them in. You know, that's what makes this band the band that they are. You know, these fucking yelps of delight and screams of, you know, enthusiasm that then seep into the other mics." And poor Joe was trying to desperately, you know, get them out of the mix, and for Gavin to tell him to put them back in, you know. So
I think those little bits that you speak about as well, the kind of madness of it, that's what really gives that first record its energy, or it's quite a key contributor in that.
I remember listening to the records that I loved. They kept in those bits, you know, those bits made them. Otis Redding, Aretha Franklin, The Doors. Even the humbug stuff from the Arctic Monkeys, you know, they keep those imperfections in.
I mean, all the way back to the Beatles, they did it as well. Had those little kind of wee bits just tagged on the end of songs, just taken from recordings.
Yeah, and I love hearing conversation in studios, and I love hearing little stints. And you know, what's the famous one? The one from Abbey Road where he introduces "Let It Be." That was Archangel from the Kingdom Come. And now you're going to hear Paulie sing "Hark the Angels Come." It's just great. You just know that they're human then. You know, I think it makes the record so much more human. Bob Dylan, you know, we talk about Bob Dylan all this time, but I was riding on the Mayflower and I found a spider some land. And then he starts fucking pissing himself laughing because none of the band come in. And it's the most human you hear Dylan.
That's probably the one moment on a Dylan record that isn't completely controlled and
Sure.
kind of cater to the idea of what Dylan is.
Yeah, and I think that's just as important as anything, is having that ability to just create who you want to be and be very strict about what you are, and because people fucking love it. I love it. I love to see the bands that I'm into have a particular identity and something that they stand for or don't stand for. I think all that being in a band is a vehicle for your own opinions, your own perceived shortcomings, just exploded on this phenomenal scale that is performance. Put it in such sour words, but it's what it fucking is. You know, if I wasn't doing this, I'd be a fucking actor. You know?
You had a wee bit of a character for this record though, didn't you? Were you not in character for kind of parts of the recording process?
Yeah, you're in character for everything, man. You know, I made sure to record wearing a suit. You know, I wore a suit all the time on the second record, just didn't wear anything else. And the lads sort of started following suit, if you like. You know, saw me on like the third day. I'm still in this fucking pinstripe suit with this turtleneck on and my Cuban heels. So everyone started wearing the suits. You know, it does. It gives you an atmosphere. It gives you just a world that you live in. You know, you start to become these characters, and it starts to seep into your records. It's like method acting almost, except I do it all the time. I go to take my dog for a walk, I wear some fucking Cuban heels, you know. It's just the way it is.
I think it gives you, it helps to keep you rooted in a certain kind of mindset.
Yeah, which has been the most difficult thing about lockdown, is coming back from such a long period of time away from stage. And I don't feel like I've come of age this year. Every year of my adult life so far felt like I've come of age each time. But this year I just feel like I've done nothing but take probably too many psychedelics. I don't know, man. It's just yeah, it feels like I've not done anything. Whereas before you're so overly stimulated or overstimulated to locations, to cities, to people. Festivals can age you about 3 years. You know, if you're looking, you take one look in those toilets, that's it. You've got 3 years on your life.
I think it's hard to notice yourself changing as well, though, when you're not in contact with other people as much. Like, a lot of when you notice you've changed as a person is when you see someone you haven't seen in years, and you kind of realise, oh no, I've developed quite a bit.
Sure. I think that's going to be, don't get me wrong, I think there's going to be an absolute renaissance of music after lockdown. You know, it's going to be an explosion of art and forward thinking and progressive thinking. But it's going to be really difficult to come into contact with people who you've not seen for a long time and retain whatever you had before. I don't know.
Yeah, I know you're speaking there about art. Are you still doing your paintings and stuff as well?
No, I haven't painted. I haven't painted for a while now. Actually, I've been learning drums, which has been really cool. Just learning, you know, traditional grip drums, like a Buddy Rich shit. But painting, I sort of ditched for a while. Probably I can't be bothered to clean my brushes, man. You know, I've got better things to do. Yeah, but I'll be getting back into that for sure, especially over Christmas when, you know, hopefully going back with the family, which is the hope, obviously. Christmas is my favourite time of year. Every year with our family, someone makes a fool of themselves. Last year it was me. The year before it was my stepfather. The year before that it was my auntie, who sat on my fucking Beatles records and fucking broke them. She
I
was
think that's
like,
sorter
you know,
for you than her.
Yeah.
I feel like her embarrassment doesn't quite outweigh your.
Oh,
your pain.
dude, she wasn't embarrassed. She was drunk, man. Yeah. And last year, my stepdad threatened to egg some car or something for parking outside whilst they had a drive to stop our family from parking on the road. And last year, it was me drinking whiskey and singing IRA songs. So. There you go.
Why do you think you're going to get back into painting around Christmas time, though? Just because you feel a little bit more inspired with it being your favourite time of the year, or?
I don't know. I think it's just because, you know, you're around. I struggle being around people for a prolonged amount of time. So when there's 5 or 6 of you in the house, or 4 or 5 of you in the house, I think painting has this incredible detachment from the rest of the world. I think it's probably why I took it up in lockdown, because I was so afraid of what was going on in the world. you just take yourself to this other reality, which, and sometimes movies don't cut it, and sometimes books don't cut it, sometimes music doesn't cut it. So I tried painting and I fell in love with it. I would just paint whatever came to my head. Back when I'm around other people, you need your own space and you need to escape into a world. Painting will probably be the first thing that I turn to. So
I mean, you've used paintings for inspiration kind of in your songwriting as well when you look at something like Mule Track. Because that's the name of the painting as well, isn't it?
That is, yeah, that's the exact name of the painting. Yeah, that was in the Imperial War Museum in London, and it's a painting that hangs above on a mezzanine. It's this abstract sort of. We just wanted to bring it to life. We were just captured by the image so much that we wanted to bring it to life in both word form and music form. It turned out really good for us. I like that song a lot.
Was that the first time you'd seen the painting? Like when you saw, had you heard of it before? Had you seen pictures of it before?
No, just the one. It was Charlie that actually saw it first, and then I saw it after him. The first sort of thing. Sometimes that's what inspiration is. It's almost like it comes down from the fucking sky, which is why it's so important to put yourself in front of as much opportunity and as much chance for inspiration as possible. You can't just sit and write. You can't just sit at your desk and write. It's not how it works. You have to be inspired by something. You have to, something has to completely, take over your mind for, even if it's for 20 minutes, and you're away. Yeah, when those pieces of inspiration come, it's you just have to bottle it up as quick as you can and before it goes. And some people are very good at doing it quickly, and others take a while to compartmentalize what it is they've seen or heard, but all the same.
How did that function for this painting? Was that something that you took a while to kind of muse upon, or was it something that very much you kind of had a visceral reaction to and you wrote pretty quick off the back of having it in your mind?
Yeah, I think the music was something that we spent a long time on, but the lyrics were very much just fucking straight away. The overwhelming sense that you get from places like Imperial War Museum, whether they mean to or not, whether they mean to instill it into you or not, is a sense that war is just so futile and pointless. And, as we're coming up from the 11th of November today, it's probably interesting to talk about how I find it very difficult to think about war dead, because it just feels like such a waste of life, such a loss of life. And all of those people, every single statistic that are killed in war is a person, is a human being with thoughts like ours and with dreams like ours. And so when you see a painting like Mule Track in the context, you do question why it is that we live for heaven and hell, and why we try and make our lives so rigid and so obstructed by something that's meant to be waiting for us after this life. Fuck that. I'm not doing that. Fuck that. I'm getting my fucking kicks now. I'm not waiting around to go up to some fucking heaven or hell. Fuck that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you say in the song, if hell is below, then what is this?
Because there's so much going on here that is worth putting right and worth fucking fixing. It's a pondering song, it's meant to make you ponder and just think. Not that many clergymen are going to be listening to our music, I suppose, but so I don't imagine we'll be converting any people with that mindset. But oh yeah,
it's interesting that you follow it then with Rage at the Dying of the Light. It's almost like you're answering the question to a certain extent that Mule Track poses.
Oh yeah, if we allow the things that are happening to continue, then that is a genuine scenario. I like the way that Radiohead play around with words, and they make such simple phrases and such simple ideas blossom into sprawling songs. So Rage at the Dying of the Light, I can imagine like Tom York singing it or something. And yeah, it just creates that scenario of apocalypse, and would you rather have some sort of suicide pact with your lover and die together, other than having this long, slow, drawn out, horrendously painful death, which is probably going to come to us sooner than we think, if we're not fucking careful.
Yeah, it's an interesting. It feels like, I mean, this is the tensest I can ever remember it being. in terms of just global tensions with everything that's going on.
Yeah, yeah. It's all my life. I've never had anything that goes for me in terms of politically and socially. And I think that's why so many people of our age are questioning why is that the case, you know? Why have we got two old fucking white men arguing over the presidency in the United States of America? I mean, don't get me wrong, I imagine that Biden will bring some sort of normality back to the United States, but still, you know, is it quick enough? Is it because before we know it, there's going to be some sort of global emergency that, you know, is 10 times worse than the pandemic that we're going through, that is related to climate change, or that is related to reaping what we sow from the shit that we've been doing for the last 200 years. So until that happens, I'm going to get my fucking kicks.
I mean, you touched upon that as well in This Decade, which is again another song similar to Mule Trip, where you're kind of pondering things. You're kind of just looking at the horizon and being like, who knows what's going to happen next?
Yeah, it's In This Decade's the best song I've ever written. I'll happily say that. It's just don't know where that came from. It's everything I wanted to say in one song, and it does. You know, you've got like you say with Mule Track, you know, it's all about being in the now and not conforming to this idea of afterlife and be good in this life because in the next one you'll be rewarded. You know, it's do it now. If you've got someone to tell that you love them, that you haven't told them in a while, you know, do it, because you never know what's going to happen at this rate, you know, especially with the coronavirus, you know, and people who lose their families, and, you know, whole families have just been ripped apart by it. It's just so important now more than ever to tell someone you love them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's interesting what you're saying there about that being the best song that you feel like you've written as well, and it does feel like a complete kind of cohesive thought, and it is, like you say, a perfect summation of a lot of the themes of the record. Although it was written as a singular song, how did putting it at the end of that kind of affect the way you felt about it and the way you kind of perceived it?
I mean, we knew as soon as we heard that song that it had to go at the end of the record. You know, it was, you just get them sometimes. And I remember showing it to Rob Ellis. Well, I actually showed it to Matt, you know, the former drummer who I used to live with at the time. He had this crazy argument with his girlfriend, which I overheard, not through intention. And I just penned it there and then. And I played it in the second pre-production that we had. So Rob had come down. Pre-production is basically, you know, your producer comes and listens to you play the songs in a rehearsal room set up, and he changes them around. We were just having a break, and I started playing it and said, Matt, listen to this, what I, you know, wrote last night. And Rob just said, stop there, whatever you're doing. He said, what the fuck is that? Oh, it's just this song that I've just been doing. It's like, well, that changes everything. That's got to go on the record. He says, oh, well, what do you want to do with it? You know, what do you want to put strings on it? Do you want to put some pianos, like get like a cave ballad sort of thing? Like, no. He says, I want you to go to the pub. I want you to have 5 or 6 pints. I want you to come back and record it on a microphone, just one microphone. So we had that in the back of our mind while we were in the studio. We was always trying to find the correct night to do it. You know, I would ask Rob, say, you know, is tonight the night, Rob? Are we gonna record In This Decade? He's like, no, it's just not quite right tonight. Maybe tomorrow. All right, no worries. And finally we got to it, and I just remember just fucking almost crying after recording it. Just sort of moved me to almost to tears. Yeah, and I'm just so glad it exists.
I mean, it shows us a different side of your vocals as well that we've not really heard before.
Yeah, probably one that's gonna persist. I really like that style. The stuff that we've been doing just through the nature of lockdown, behind a laptop with a microphone, with one guitar and acoustic, it is sort of held back a little bit more. So, but we're working on a lot of stuff that we're really, really excited to pursue.
Do you have like a concept yet? Do you have an idea that's going to unify this together, or is it just kind of songs that are coming out of where we're at right now?
The one sort of consistency of the stuff that we're doing at the moment is this idea of going to somewhere else, creating these sort of lyrical landscapes, if that makes sense. We're very much trying to paint images with words and paint colours in your mind, which has been really exciting. And I think is me and Charlie sort of got our each relative chunks of paper together and slammed them on a desk and said, "What you got then?" And almost every song that we wrote had the word "sun" in, which I thought was really interesting. So yeah, it's a lot of escapism, a lot of otherworldly. I think the title that we've got going around our heads at the moment, which is really interesting, is vaguely regarding the flowers, which I think is a nice summary for the stuff that we're doing. So
as part of that, I remember last time we spoke as well, as part of that escapism, because you were reading quite a lot of stuff like that, because I remember you were like quite into Pratchett and things. And
yeah, probably the reason why I can sit and talk here so much about the first record and the second record is because I'm looking at it retrospectively, whereas what I'm doing now is very much in the now, so I don't really know what's going on, just still sort of feeling our way through it in the dark. I don't know really. I'll be able to talk about it in 6 or 12 months, I assume, but until then, I don't know. We're just going to keep doing what we're doing, and very excited to get in the studio again, which is our intention. We've just finished a few demos, which are sounding fucking great. So,
at what point did you get that with this album, where you felt like you were able to speak about it and you kind of gained that sense of perspective on it, where it's no longer something that you're in the midst of and it's kind of done and you can talk about it?
Yeah, when you start moving on to different stuff, when it stops becoming the forefront of your mind, when you're making a record, and the subsequent months after that, all you think about is that it's just your soul's work for the last 12 to 16 months. It's your mind. It's a document. It's documenting whatever's going on in your head, and I think that's so unique. It's much like an author working on a novel or something. That you get up, you think about it, you do something about it, you go to bed, you think about it. You can't sleep because you're thinking about it. So when you stop thinking about it, then you can start talking about it.
Is it ever tough when you're in the midst of that, and you can't stop thinking about it?
Yeah, you become obsessed over it. You become through and through an obsessionist. I haven't got time for anyone who says you're overthinking things, or that's the phrase I always hear. You're overthinking things. You're looking into it too much. Fuck that. There's no such thing as overthinking something. Attention to detail and specific detail is what make people great artists and almost geniuses. You cannot be at the top of at the peak of your ability if you're not thinking about those attention to detail. So yeah, I'm a complete fucking obsessionist. People hate being around me when we're making records, but that's just the way it is. That's just the way I work.
Were you like that before you made music, do you think? Was that already something that was kind of in you, and this is just a way to channel that slightly obsessive nature?
Possibly. I think it sparked. I think it was definitely there underneath me somewhere, but I think it sparked when I picked up a guitar and I knew that I was gonna be learning this, and I wanted to learn it to the best of my ability. But it's never hit me like it has before when working in music. And there's a desire there and a real intent to chase something. I've got so many ideas in my head that I want to sort of translate into the real world, which can be really frustrating. It's just a pure obsession.
Was there anything else that music triggered in you in the same way that it spawned that slightly obsessive, attention to detail? Like, I mean, if you think about the energy of the records, was that an energy that was kind of present in you before, or was that again something that music kind of brought out of you?
Yeah, I mean, I always enjoyed acting when I was younger. I used to go to acting classes and workshops and was in a load of school plays. And I always remember every character that I would do, I'd go full on. It was a little bit scary, actually.
Who were you playing? What sort of thing were you doing?
I did like Oedipus, I think, was a favourite. That was really cool. Leave It to Smith, which was a really interesting show, a really interesting play. Oedipus was probably the most enjoyable, which is the story of a king who has this crazy infatuation with his mother and is blinded, and it's a wild tale where you get the Oedipus complex from. And yeah, it's so that's all you sort of see doing records as, is doing this character, doing this being someone you're not. It's just really exciting to me, being able to be someone that you're not. because being yourself fucking sucks. So, yeah, I don't know.
Was that the same with I Want Gold? Because on that track, you're kind of writing from the perspective of someone.
Yeah. Just want to create this nasty sort of character that's just an exaggeration, a blown out version of an almost caricature of so much of the deserving right wing attitude that's there now, and people call millennials sort of entitled, but I don't think you get more entitled than old bald white guys from pretty well off families. Yeah, it's all projection, man. It's all but yeah, I Want Gold was a really exciting song to do. Very fun.
Was that something you'd had in your head for a while? Did you have the idea that you wanted to write something about bankers and the kind of, well, I guess it touches a wee bit on the kind of financial crisis type thing too?
At first, it was literally a prayer to myself at 4 a.m. in bed, just saying, I want gold, I want money, I want to feel like Bugs Bunny. That's where it started. And then, as you go on, you start twisting and turning different parts of it, and yeah, it just sort of unravels itself, and you create that sort of banker, that sort of big guy with the that sort of cartoon guy with the big bag that has the dollar sign on it, and it's one of those, man.
The kind of Scrooge McDuck figure.
Yeah.
Just diving into a pool of gold.
That's exactly it, actually. I'm pretty sure that was on our mood board for I Want Gold.
Wait, so did you have a mood board for each individual
track?
track?
Yeah. Every track we flesh out with imagery and with writing around it, and which is really, it's quite disappointing actually when we release the tracks and people only get this sort of face value thing, where I'd love one day to be able to share all of these sort of thought dreams and writings that we have around each track, because we treat each track as its own little world and just expand it out into stuff that we just get kicks out of it,
I think you get a real sense of that with like Circle Song when you think about the types of things you're referencing and the kind of imagery in that.
Yeah, Circle was probably the one that we wrote the most around, actually. I think we had this this crossroads short story around it. It's just like 6 or 7 pages long. Just this idea of this protagonist getting to a crossroad, and one road was winding and you couldn't see where he was going, but it could lead to success, or it could lead to the end of the road, ultimate failure. On the other way, said distinctly that it was going to your own doom, and it spelt it out for you. This road will go to your doom, but it's straight and it's an easy road, and it's just, you can see the end right there. So do you go for the one that also probably goes to your doom, but you got to twist and turn, and you got to fucking follow it to the end of the fucking earth on the slightest chance you could come to peaceful pastures, whereas the other one is dead easy, and a lot of people have to make that decision, and it's just fascinating to play around with words around stuff. And
so was that kind of that story that you'd written, was that written before or after the lyrics for the song came?
It was written after the lyrics. Yeah, I always think that with lyrics it's a splash of paint on a canvas, and then afterwards you interpret that paint on the canvas. So you just let it do its own thing first, whatever it is that comes to you, and lightning bolt in your head sort of thing. Afterwards you say, well, what the fuck have I wrote here? And sometimes it's a load of shite. And you've just got to accept that. Sometimes you have to look and think, well, that's no good. But sometimes it's like, well, we're onto something here.
That maybe explains as well why you have to wait until you've finished working, or I mean, it ties into what we're saying about when you finish working on a record. That's when you can speak about it, because the process for a record then becomes kind of working out what it is you're trying to say with it and expand upon it and develop it fully. I
imagine that it is something to do with that, and you always run into the risk of over explaining yourself. I'm so guilty for on so many levels. So you try and hold yourself back to give the audience room to interpret themselves, and they can make their own. At this rate, the way that I'm explaining our stuff, we're never going to have any fucking 12 versions of The Shining explanations, are we, on our stuff? Yeah, because but that's the thing, and also that's a very important thing. Even though I have my own interpretations of what we do. I want other people to sort of have their own thoughts and their own feelings on it, because again, I'm just a vehicle for whatever it is that we're writing. I'm not the be all and end all, the audience is that, definitely.
Is it ever difficult to leave things open? Do you kind of have a tendency to want to tie them up and wrap it up in your vision, or is it quite easy to kind of leave that space for people to impart their own?
No, I think I find it quite difficult to leave the space, actually, yeah. Everything to me that I do feels rational, on all walks of life. I very rarely do anything that feels irrational to me, whether that's just narcissism or what, I don't know. But yeah, so it is very difficult for me to leave things open. But I don't know. I need a psychiatrist to explain that, Alex. I don't know what's going on. I just do it.
How does that rational approach to everything manifest itself when it comes to your creativity at large, though, in the kind of the process that it is?
Everything has to work. Everything has to feel right. I think there's a lot of feel in our band, and you just know when you're not on the same wavelength with someone, straight away. But the complete opposite of that, which is what we're experiencing at the moment, is when you are all in the same mindset and you're all on that same level of thought and of empathy, and of understanding that everyone is a human being and everyone has their own very, very, very complicated lives. Then everything just works. You find a groove and it becomes rational. It just makes sense. Sometimes you can't describe why something sounds so good. If you had some sort of music theorist come in and they'd be like, well, it sounds good because that's there and that's that and this is doing that and that's fucking that. But we never look at it like that. We never break anything down like that. It just works. But the obsession comes when you go into a studio, and again, it just perfection to me is rational. That is just something that goes in my head. Absolute perfection is the rational thing for me. Yeah, I'm a bastard to be in a studio with, but I like to think that it's for a good cause.
Was that the same with both of your collaborations with both Rob and Gavin? Are they both kind of in a similar mindset when it comes to perfection?
Yes and no. I think they actually bring me off of that path a little bit and sort of put a hand around me after I've had a tantrum and say, look, it's not that big of a deal. Focus your mindset on that a little more. So we come full circle. The importance of producers is to have that guiding hand and tell you when you're being a little bit silly over things. But at the same time, producers have just a wonderful understanding of music, and they just learn how to be very quick at it, and because they've had 15, 20, 30 years of experience. We're still new in the game, It
comes back to as well what you were saying earlier about producers kind of having to stop you going down those rabbit holes. They have this ability to see everything all at once, the entire record in view, whereas when it comes to perfectionism, you are kind of, fixating on the one thing in that moment.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, don't get me wrong, if we had unlimited time in the studio and, an unlimited budget, then I'm sure management of the label would be like, yeah, let Tom do what he fucking wants. But that's not fucking... the reality of the situation. The reality of the situation is, time is money, and you've only got so much time to deal with, so you have to manage that correctly. All I'm saying is, if you gave me unlimited time and unlimited money, I would make the fucking best record you have ever heard. But until that day, we'll have to wait a bit, won't we?